As I prepared to return to my hometown to give birth, I never expected the conversation with my mother-in-law to go the way it did. With a smirk, I asked her, "Why don't you just stay there forever? I don't want to see your freeloading face again." Her harsh words stung, but I managed to stay composed, replying, "All right, take care then. My name is Michelle, and I'm 32. I've been with Kevin for 3 years." Our relationship began at a party, sparked by our shared love for music. After exchanging numbers, we started spending our evenings chatting about everything, our favorite songs, work frustrations, usually over drinks at the local bar. Those evenings with Kevin were always filled with laughter and time seemed to fly. Soon after, we became a couple, and life with him felt like the perfect balance. Despite our demanding jobs, we made time for each other on weekends, which kept me motivated throughout the week. Our relationship was a source of joy and support, helping me thrive in my career. A year into our relationship, we took a major step and moved in together. We were both serious about our future and began talking about marriage. Living together brought us even closer, helping us understand each other's habits and quirks. A year later, I was more certain than ever that I wanted to marry Kevin, and I eagerly awaited his proposal, though I suspected he was waiting for just the right moment. Then, one evening, out of nowhere, Kevin invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant. It wasn't a special occasion, but something in the air told me this might be it. After work, I arrived at the restaurant, nerves and excitement bubbling inside me. When I saw Kevin, I noticed that he seemed even more anxious than I felt. His nervousness was strangely comforting, and when he greeted me awkwardly, I couldn't help but chuckle quietly. The meal went on, and Kevin's unease was palpable. As we finished our main course, he looked at me intently, his voice soft but earnest. "Michelle," he said, his gaze steady, making me a little nervous. "You're the most wonderful person, and I want to cherish you forever. I hope you feel the same. Will you marry me?" He slid a ring across the table. My heart swelled, and without thinking, I blurted, "Yes. I can't wait to start our life together." With our engagement official, happiness filled me, but life soon swept us into its busy current. We had to meet each other's families, arrange gatherings, and begin planning the wedding, all while juggling our careers. Kevin and I somehow made it work. When I introduced Kevin to my parents, they immediately liked him, charmed by his sincerity and warmth. Their approval meant the world to me, and I was so grateful they welcomed him into our lives. The visit to Kevin's parents, however, didn't go as smoothly. His mother, after meeting me, bluntly remarked, "Kevin's fiancée seems rather plain." I was stunned. Before I could respond, Kevin spoke up defensively. "Mom, what are you saying?" "She's the woman I've chosen," he said sharply. "I'm just being honest," she retorted. Kevin's father quickly stepped in to ease the tension. "Enough, Susan. That's uncalled for." Despite their attempts to defend me, I couldn't shake off the sting of her words. Later, Kevin apologized. "Michelle, I'm so sorry about my mom. She's always been like that, straightforward, maybe too much so," he admitted. "I know it's not easy, but don't let her get to you. If she crosses a line again, let me know." "I'll handle it," he promised, his sincerity easing my worries. Kevin had always been protective, even when we first met. Still, anxiety gnawed at me, especially with the upcoming family gathering. I feared Susan might be just as blunt with my parents. But Kevin reassured me that he'd handle things delicately. I also prepared my parents for her forthright personality, which they were now somewhat expecting. The day of the meeting arrived, and my nerves were on edge for a different reason. "Hello, I'm Kevin's dad." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Jack said, offering a friendly handshake to my parents. "We're Michelle's parents," they replied warmly. The atmosphere started off cordial, but Susan remained distant, sitting down without engaging. "I'll have a red wine. Looks like we'll need it to get through this," she said, her remark casting an awkward shadow over the table. My parents, taken aback by her bluntness, fell silent for a moment. Kevin and his dad exchanged uncomfortable glances but quickly apologized for Susan's rudeness. As the meal went on, my parents and Jack engaged in light-hearted conversation, but Susan grew increasingly disruptive. A government job might be stable, but the pay's nothing to brag about. Kevin's marrying into a rather dull family, she said, her words more biting as the evening wore on. If they have kids, they'll probably be just as boring, she added. Enough. Jack snapped, his voice thick with anger. You need to leave now. Reluctantly, Susan stood up, mumbling about how she was just being honest. Jack escorted her outside to arrange for her to go home. When he returned, he and Kevin apologized again. I was grateful that we had a private room for this gathering. It had turned out to be more challenging than we anticipated. At our wedding, Susan was noticeably subdued, likely out of respect for Jack's stern warning that any outbursts would have serious consequences, including hints at divorce. Thankfully, she kept her comments to herself, and the day went off without a hitch, much to my relief. With our marriage underway, Kevin and I settled into a rhythm. We shared household responsibilities equally, and Kevin's cooking was a bonus. Even on days when he came home late from work, we would cook together, turning those moments into joyful memories. Kevin also made an effort to visit his family alone to avoid tensions between Susan and me, which I deeply appreciated. But then tragedy struck. Kevin's father, Jack, fell ill and passed away suddenly. We rushed to the hospital, but we were too late. Dad! Kevin cried out, his voice raw with disbelief. The loss hit him hard, and even Susan, despite everything, was visibly devastated. How could you leave me like this? She cried. Though my relationship with Susan had always been strained, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. Grief has a way of breaking down walls. Together, we mourned Jack, the kind man who had always shown me nothing but kindness. In the days that followed, Kevin and I helped with the funeral arrangements, and though the sadness was overwhelming, we kept moving forward. Kevin led the way, and I supported him in any way I could. The funeral went smoothly, and we gave Jack a send-off he deserved. As life slowly returned to normal, we adjusted to the absence of Jack. Kevin seemed determined to move forward with renewed purpose. But just as we thought things might settle, an unexpected challenge arose. Kevin, please, I need help. Susan's voice came through the door, her presence unexpected and unsettling. Mom, what's wrong? Kevin asked, his concern clear. Her voice softened. Since your father passed, I've felt so lonely. Nothing tastes right anymore. I just wanted to see the faces of my only family, my son and his wife. Her words struck a chord, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't expected. Could I stay with you for a little while? She asked, her voice laced with desperation. Kevin and I were taken aback by her request. I feel like I'll be crushed by loneliness if things continue this way, she pleaded. We hesitated but ultimately reasoned that a short stay wouldn't harm us. Susan seemed fragile, and we doubted she had the energy to act hostile towards me. So, we agreed to let her stay. Surprisingly, she adapted well. She even began helping with household chores. Staying in your home is the least I can do. Thank you, you're lifesavers, she said gratefully. Kevin and I appreciated her efforts, and life became manageable, almost pleasant. However, after about 5 months, Susan started slipping back into her old ways. Michelle, aren't you planning to quit your job? Isn't it normal for wives to stop working? She remarked one day, signaling the return of her earlier behavior. You've been working all this time, I started, but Susan quickly grew defensive. Turning to Kevin, I said, we need to talk to Mom and ask her to consider moving back to her hometown. When Kevin broached the subject, Susan's response stunned us. I've already sold the family home, she confessed. Kevin and I exchanged shocked glances. Mom, why would you do that without discussing it with us? That's our family home. I inherited it from Dad. Kevin said, disbelief in his voice. Selling it was my decision, Susan shrugged, dismissing the gravity of the matter. You should have at least informed us, Kevin countered, frustration evident. I forgot. Sorry. Now I have nowhere else to go, so please don't kick me out, Susan pleaded. We were left speechless, struggling to process the situation. As we tried to make sense of it, another unexpected development occurred. I discovered I was pregnant. Kevin and I were overjoyed. We had been hoping for a child, but given our age, we were nearly ready to give up. This news was a wonderful surprise. However, the joy of expanding our family was tempered by the looming challenge of dealing with Susan during the pregnancy. Her complaints resumed. She argued with Kevin, "Why do I have to cook for you too? I'm only staying here because of Kevin, not you." Traditionally, the wife handles all the housework. Kevin explained that she only needed to cook for herself and him, and do her laundry, but she stubbornly refused to contribute anything for me. Despite Kevin's reprimands, she would only show temporary remorse before slipping back into old habits. At my wit's end, I decided to start my maternity leave early and return to my parents' house to find some peace. When I discussed this with Kevin, he suggested a solution. We both agreed it was the best option. I informed Susan of our decision and began preparing for the move. "You're going back home to give birth?" she asked sharply.
Yes, it's the best decision for a safer childbirth, and I'll be leaving household duties behind for a while. Kevin supports this decision, I explained.
Upon hearing this, Susan smirked disdainfully. "Why not just stay at your parents' house forever? I don't want to see your parasitic face around here anyway. I bet even Kevin has had enough of you. You don't need to come back to this house," she sneered. Her words, though harsh, surprisingly brought me a sense of relief. "All right then, take care," I replied calmly, then returned to my parents' home, where I was welcomed with open arms and the peace I so desperately needed. A month later, Kevin visited my parents' house with exciting news. "I finally got approval from work to transition to remote work permanently, and I found us a new place to live," he said with a bright smile. "That's fantastic," I exclaimed, thrilled at the prospect of a fresh start. Kevin had rented an apartment near my parents' house, making it easier for us to settle in and begin our new life together. He also terminated the lease on the room Susan had been staying in and finalized our move to the new apartment. Susan, clearly unsettled by the changes, called me in a panic. "Hey Michelle, where are you?" "I'm at our new place with Kevin," I replied. "New place? Where?" Her voice sounded urgent. "I'll let you know in time, but I have to be honest, I'm canceling the lease here and moving everything out. I can't stay here anymore," I explained, emphasizing that Kevin and I were moving forward with our new life. "Kevin said he's cutting ties with me. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore," she asked, her voice cracking. "Yes, we're starting fresh somewhere else," I replied, trying to make her understand the finality of our decision. "So you were just pretending to be nice to stay here, huh? This was your plan all along?" Susan accused me, misunderstanding my intentions. "You couldn't make any money from selling the house you got from Jack, right? How did you find out?" I asked, surprised by her knowledge. "You were telling the neighbors how frustrated you were that the house your husband left had no value. Then suddenly, it was up for sale. People can't keep quiet about things like that. Give me Kevin back. I'm that kid's parent, so I have the right to live with him," she screamed. "As I've said before, he doesn't want to see you, and I won't pressure him into something he's uncomfortable with," I replied calmly. Her anger flared. "Who do you think you are, acting all high and mighty when you're just a broke, freeloading, plain wife? That's not a nice thing to say, but it's true," she snapped. "Well, I don't think our paths will cross much in the future, so it doesn't concern me," I responded calmly. "But let me clarify something. Alongside my full-time job, I also have a side gig, and I actually earn more than Kevin." "Oh really? What's this side gig?" Susan asked skeptically. "I studied web design, and I've been taking on freelance projects. With my full-time salary and freelance work, I'm bringing in about $10,000 a month," I explained. "What? That much? That's more than Jack used to make." Susan was taken aback by my financial situation, clearly not expecting that the wife she had underestimated was earning that much. "But none of this concerns you. Kevin has cut ties with you, and I'll be distancing myself even further," I asserted firmly. "Wait a minute. If you're making that kind of money, maybe you could lend me a hand? Susan suggested hopefully. Without hesitation, I ended the call and blocked her number. It was a relief to expose Susan's true intentions, and leaving her in regret, knowing I wouldn't have to deal with her again, gave me a sense of peace. Susan was now completely out of the loop. She didn't know where my parents lived or where I worked. With Kevin working from home and our new address kept private, the chances of her finding us were slim. We later heard through the grapevine that Susan's spending habits hadn't changed. Any inheritance Jack left had quickly dwindled, and she had tried to sell the house but only received low offers. Her financial troubles worsened, and she resorted to payday loans and asking neighbors for money, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Kevin and I were living a peaceful life, free from disruptions from Susan. We divided our time between our own home and my parents' place as we prepared for the arrival of our child. With the baby on the way, we were excited about the future and looked forward to nurturing our growing family, cherishing every moment together. This newfound peace was something we treasured deeply, knowing the chaos that had once surrounded us.